Hello, my name is Philippe Girard. I'm a professor in the history department at McNeese State University.
And I'm Amber Hale from the biology department at McNeese. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks, where we explore the lives of famous women in history.
Welcome and bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, music, literature, and history as we retrace the life of a remarkable woman. She was a maid and novelist.
Also, she was a slave and a runaway.
She wrote the first novel ever written by an African-American woman.
Her name was?
Hannah Crafts.
Along the way, we will sample songs by female black singers from the United States.
Selecting those songs was probably easy. There are a lot of great ones.
Too many, in fact. I chose to concentrate on oldies, but even then I had to leave a lot of them on the editing floor. We will start with the voice of the civil rights movement, Odetta Holmes. She influenced many artists, including Bob Dylan, and she was in turn influenced by them. Here is Baby, I'm in the Mood for You.
Sometimes I'm in the mood, I want to leave my lonesome home. Sometimes I'm in the mood, I want to hear my milk cow moan. Sometimes I'm in the mood, I want to hit that highway road. But then again, then again, then again, then again, oh baby, I'm in a mood for you. Sometimes I'm in the mood, I want to back up against the wall. Sometimes I'm in the mood, I want to live in my pony's stall. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I don't want to do nothing at all. Then again, then again, then again, then again, oh babe, I'm in a mood for you. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I want to change in this old town. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I'm gonna change the world around. But then again, then again, then again, then again, oh babe, I'm in a mood for you. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I wanna lay me down and die. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I wanna fly up to the sky. Sometimes I'm in a mood, I wanna laugh until I cry. Well then again, then again, then again, then again, says, oh babe, I'm in a mood for you. But then again, then again, then again, then again, I say, oh babe, I'm in a mood for you.
Bonjour, and welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks.
We just listened to Odetta's 1965 rendition of Baby, I'm in the Mood for You, a song originally written by Bob Dylan in 1962.
Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. Today on KBYS, we're exploring the life of the black novelist Hannah Crafts.
Our story begins with a mysterious handwritten manuscript bearing the title The Bondwoman's Narrative by Hannah Crafts, a fugitive slave from North Carolina.
The manuscript languished for many years in an attic in New Jersey until it was purchased in 1948 by a librarian who paid just $85 for it.
More years passed until Henry Louis Gates Jr., a professor at Harvard University, bought the manuscript at auction in 2001 for $8,500.
Dr. Gates is best known for hosting shows on genealogy and black history on PBS. You know him personally, Philippe, right?
Yes, he was nice enough to invite me a few years back to spend a semester as a research fellow at the Du Bois Institute at Harvard. This was one of the great academic experiences of my life.
I bet. After purchasing the manuscript, Dr. Gates had it authenticated by experts. They confirmed that it was genuine, and the book was published by Warner Books in 2002.
And it became a bestseller. The book was the first novel written by a black woman in the U.S. and the only one written by a fugitive slave. That made it very significant historically, but it also happened to be a very good read too.
So who was this Hannah Crafts?
This was $1 million question. We'll get to it later in the show.
So you want to keep up the suspense, huh?
Exactly.
Let's listen to another song then. I've always liked Aretha Franklin.
Respect is probably her most famous song, but we'll go with my personal favorite, I Say a Little Prayer from 1968.
Welcome back. I'm Amber Hale, co-host of Your Grandma Rocks, your favorite women's history show on KBYS.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
We just listened to I Say a Little Prayer by Aretha Franklin. Today we're talking about Hannah Crafts, the mysterious author of The Bondwoman's Narrative.
That manuscript was purchased and then published by Henry Louis Gates Jr. of Harvard University in 2002.
The novel immediately fascinated literary scholars. The voice of the narrator is unique, perceptive and blunt, but also passionate and even humorous.
Hannah Crafts showed that slavery, even when experienced by a privileged household slave like her, was dehumanizing and soul-crushing. She also did a lot in the novel to bring humanity to people who had often been treated as subhuman.
Here's what Dr. Gates had to say about the book. Quote, Hannah Crafts writes the way we can imagine Black people talk to and about one another when white auditors were not around, and not in the way that abolitionists thought they talked, or Black authors thought they should talk, or wanted white readers to believe that they talked. This is a voice that we have rarely, if ever, heard before. End quote.
Hannah Crafts' book bears a lot of similarities to the slave narratives that were commonly published in the 19th century, Like them, it's presented as an autobiography of a slave, and it follows the author's life from bondage in the South to freedom in the North.
Kind of like the narrative of Frederick Douglass.
Yes, or the narrative of Olaudah Equiano, which is also very good.
But the book was also a work of fiction inspired by the sentimental novels of the Victorian era.
Hannah Crafts explained it herself. The book was, quote, a record of plain, unvarnished facts, but also a literary venture.
So it was a slave narrative and a sentimental novel. She borrowed from those two tropes, but she also broke established norms. Contrary to other 19th century novels, her book didn't treat the vulnerability of women as something to be celebrated, but as a form of gender oppression. Also, contrary to many slave narratives, the book ended on an optimistic note. The escaped slave was able to leave a quasi-normal life in exile.
Based on various clues in the novel, scholars guess that the novel was written sometime between 1853 and 1860.
Also, it was obvious from her style that the author had read widely, from Charlotte Bronte to Charles Dickens.
But the question was, who was she?
Was she even a former slave? Or was this book of fiction written by a white person or even a man?
The response came a decade after the book was published.
Are you going to make us wait again for the grand reveal?
Yes, and then we'll finally know the answer, at last.
At last? That's another great song. Let's listen to it now.
Your wish is my command. Here is Etta James.
At last, my love has come along. My lonely days are over, and life is like a song. Oh yeah, yeah, at last the skies above are blue. My heart was wrapped up in clover. The night I looked at you, I found a dream that I could speak to, a dream that I can call my own. I found a thrill to press my cheek to, a thrill that I have never known. Oh yeah, you smile. Oh, and then the spell was cast, and here we are in heaven. For you are mine at last.
Bonjour à tous, and welcome back to Your Grammar Rocks on KBYS. This was At Last by Etta James. Je suis Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hale. Today we're discussing Hannah Crafts. Her name appeared on the cover of a 19th century manuscript that was first published in 2002. But for a long time, the real identity of the author remained a mystery.
Until that mystery was solved by Dr. Greg Akimovich.
Do you know him too, Philippe?
I do. I told you earlier that Skip Gates had invited me for research fellowship at Harvard a few years back. Greg happened to be another research fellow during my semester there, and we became good friends. Full disclosure, he's the one who introduced me to martinis, which has remained my favorite cocktail ever since.
I see. So that's what you were doing at Harvard. I thought you two were supposed to be doing research during that fellowship.
We did, I promise, but we met after work to discuss our findings and share a few drinks.
Where does he teach?
Winthrop University, that's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. He is the head of the English department there.
So, at long last, let's answer the question. Who was the mysterious Hannah Crafts?
Drum roll, please.
Sorry, Phil, but this is a low-budget show. You'll have to do without the sound effects.
Darn it. All right, the real name of the author was Hannah, but Hannah Bond.
Who was she?
She was a slave on the plantation of John Hill Wheeler in Murfreesboro, North Carolina.
That's right along the border with Virginia. So she was indeed a woman and a slave.
Yes, her owner, John Wheeler, was somewhat famous. He had served as U.S. ambassador to Nicaragua.
He also became famous when he visited Pennsylvania in 1855, and one of his slaves took the opportunity to flee. Wheeler sued under the Fugitive Slave Act to get his slave back. A court punished the abolitionist who had protected her after her escape, but Wheeler never got his slave back.
So Hannah Bond had a model to follow. One of the Wheeler slaves had managed to escape.
Exactly.
But Hannah Bond was not just any slave. She was light-skinned, and she lived in a plantation home where she was a personal servant of Wheeler's wife, Ellen. There, she learned how to read and write.
In one scene of the novel, the mistress dictates a letter to her maid, so it's even possible that Hannah Bond served as a secretary on occasion.
Greg Yakimovich discovered that the paper used by Hannah Crafts to write her novel was the same paper that the Wheelers used on the plantation, which was one of the ways he was able to identify her.
He also looked at the books in the Wheeler library. Sure enough, the Wheelers owned many of the novels that inspired Hannah when writing the novel, like Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and Rob Roy by Sir Walter Scott.
Bleak House by Charles Dickens was another inspiration.
As it turns out, girls from a nearby school would stay at the Wheeler plantation as boarders. As part of their curriculum, the students were expected to memorize chunks of this novel, which is probably how Hannah became familiar with it.
It is really neat how all the dots are connecting.
Yes, it is. Before we reach the end of our story, let's take another musical break. Knowing you, I figured that at some point we'll be treated to some 70s disco music.
You got that right. We're headed for the year 1978.
First I was afraid, I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong. And I grew strong, and I learned how to get along. And so you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I'd have known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Oh, now go, walk out the door. Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye?
You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. This was I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. I'm Amber Hill.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese. Today we are retracing the life of the black novelist Hannah Crafts.
She began her life as a slave named Hannah Bond on the Wheeler Plantation in North Carolina, where she experienced slavery firsthand and read many books in her master's library.
The most dramatic moment in her life took place in 1857.
That's when she acquired men's clothes, possibly with the help of a sympathetic member of the Wheeler family.
Because she was light-skinned, she was able to pass as a white boy and escape from the plantation unnoticed.
She made her way north along the Underground Railroad and got all the way to upstate New York, where she was hosted by a couple named the Crafts.
That's probably where she got the inspiration for her pen name of Hannah Crafts. It was a way to disguise her original identity while paying tribute to the people who had helped her escape from bondage.
Why couldn't she just use her real name?
Her owner had tried to recover another escaped slave under the Fugitive Slave Act, so I guess that she preferred to live incognito.
And that makes sense. Hannah later moved to New Jersey, where she got married and became a school teacher. So, like her novel, her life had a happy ending.
She wrote the novel that made her famous either right before or right after her escape.
But after her death, the novel sat untouched in an attic for many years.
Until it was bought by Skip Gates and published.
Well, we've now come full circle to the beginning of our program.
Except that we now know who Hannah Crafts really was.
Yes, and it's always good when those slave stories end well. It was unfortunately not always the case.
We'll celebrate with another song, Feeling Good by Nina Simone.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me, yeah. It's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a new life for me. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossom on the tree, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. And I'm feeling good. Dragonfly out in the sun, you know what I mean, don't you know? Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when day is done, that's what I mean. And this old world is a new world and a bold world for me. Yeah, yeah. Stars, when you shine, you know how I feel. Scent of the pine, you know how I feel. Oh, freedom is mine, and I know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me.
Bienvenue à tous. This was Feeling Good by Nina Simone. Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Amber Hill. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS, a show about remarkable women from centuries past. Today we retrace the life of novelist Hannah Crafts, who, we now know, was an escaped slave named Hannah Bond. Has Greg Hakimovich published his research yet?
In bits and pieces, but not in book format yet. He already has a book contract, but let's just say that he is a deliberate writer. When I was a research fellow with him, we used to tease him for his extreme devotion to detail. I think he spent a whole semester writing and rewriting the introduction.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading his book then. In the meantime, we can read the novel by Hannah Crafts. This one's in print, at least.
Well, it took 150 years for it to go from manuscript to published book, so maybe I shouldn't be too hard on Greg.
You shouldn't. In the meantime, it's been quite an incredible story. We're glad we could share it with you. This program was funded by a Juliet Hardner Grant for Women in the Humanities. For more information on how to help finance fellowships at McNeese, contact the Foundation at 337-475-5588.
This program was also sponsored by the History Department at McNeese. To apply for a degree in history or other fields, contact the McNeese Admissions Office at 337-475-5504.
Thank you all for listening, and goodbye.
Merci et au revoir.
Every time I look down on this timeless town, whether blue or gray be her skies, whether loud be her cheers or whether soft be her tears, more and more do I realize that I love Paris in the springtime. I love Paris in the fall. I love Paris in the winter when it drizzles. I love Paris in the summer when it sizzles. I love Paris every moment, every moment of the year. I love Paris. Why do I love Paris? Because my love is near. I love Paris in the springtime. I love Paris in the fall. I love Paris in the winter when it drizzles. I love Paris in the summer when it sizzles.